the Gators. That's how I feel. All the time. Loud and proud. Ron Burgundy understands. That's how I feel. It is hate week for the Georgia Bulldogs because those Florida Gators are up next. Welcome into this edition of the How About That Dogs Cast. I know I just called it hate week, but for me, it's not that at all. It's not that at all. And it's not that way because I hate the Florida Gators 365 days a year. Every day of the calendar year. I love it when we have a leap year because that's just one more day to hate the Florida Gators. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a lovable guy. People seem to like to hang out with me. I'm a good conversationalist. I'm a good time at parties. So it's not like I'm just out here spewing hate all over the place. No. There's only one school that I reserve that level of disdain for, and that is the blue and orange of the Florida Gators. Now, I get it honest. As the title tells you, I'm a Generation X Bulldog. I'm sure that many of you watching are going to know exactly what we're going to walk through tonight, because what I wanted to do is forego the entire thing about, well, this week we have the Florida Gators, and if we do this, we can make the SEC championship, and here are all the statistics, and here are the matchups. I didn't want to do that because that's not how I view this game. I don't even it's hard for me to break it down and think about it in that way, because for me, it is just a visceral and utter and total complete hatred for the Florida Gators. Now, I know those are strong words, but as we go through this, I'm going to try to help you better feel how I feel or understand how I feel and why I feel the way I feel about this game and that team and why I love this rivalry so very much. Just one point that I do think I want to reiterate here, because we are more than halfway through the season and standings do matter at this point. There are plenty of results on the field, and our Bulldogs have one loss on the season. And as I've been telling you for a couple of weeks, that means that the Georgia Bulldogs are in the college football playoff right now. Every game they play from here on out, including this game against the Florida Gators, is part of the University of Georgia's college football playoff run here in 2024. And it just so happens that, yes, this next team that's on the docket is the Florida Gators. Man, I don't like that orange. I don't like that blue. I like blue, not that blue. But that orange, there's really only one orange that's worse. That's the Tennessee orange. But we'll get to them later. This week is reserved for the Florida Gators. And there are other things that make this game, this iteration of this game, interesting. And that is part of why this series is Georgia's primary rivalry series. Now, I've done other videos in the past, but there are only 3 Georgia Bulldogs rivalries from the Georgia Bulldogs perspective. And usually it depends on how old you are, the order that you put these games in. As I told you, I'm a Gen Xer. So for me, the clear-cut, absolute number one rival for the Georgia Bulldogs is the Florida Gators. So it's all on the line for me this week. I'm somebody who likes to say that, I'm not out there lifting, I'm not running, I'm not on the field, I'm not making plays. Therefore, regardless of how the game goes, okay, regardless of how it turns out on the scoreboard, I am not going to let it ruin my week, my year, certainly not my month, my football season, none of that. That's overreaction in my opinion. I do not do it that way. But if there were a game that were going to have that sort of impact on me, it would be this Florida Gators game. And it's because it would bring up so many old wounds, so many bad experiences. So I have to test my own BS this week in a way, because I say that the games don't affect me that way, that I don't let them impact me in that way. This one, puts me to the test every year, win or lose. Because even if Georgia wins, in my book, they can't beat Florida badly enough. That's how I feel about the Gators. Now, just to put a bow on what I said earlier, Florida is one of 3 Georgia rivalries. The other 2, you can probably guess them pretty easy. That would be the Auburn Tigers, the Deep South's oldest rivalry, and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. I understand that Tech hasn't been serious about football for 2 decades, essentially, but they are still considered by many to be Georgia's top rival. Usually, those people are a little bit older in age. Back when Tech was competitive year in and year out, those are the memories they have. But here's what I'll say about the Georgia Tech rivalry. You might think it's not a big rivalry game for Georgia simply because of recent history. But mess around and lose that football game, and you will be reminded in a hurry just how big, how hot, how annoying that rivalry is here in the state of Georgia. So if you're the Georgia Bulldogs, don't mess around and lose that game. Handle your business against Georgia Tech. Same with Auburn. No team has crushed Georgia's championship dreams more often than the Auburn Tigers. So they are clearly in that rivalry group. But there's not one that rivals the Florida Gators in my book when it comes to who Georgia needs to get up for. And like I said, this year's a little different. Now with the transfer portal, and it's been this way in years past, you've got players moving back and forth between teams. This year, Trevor Etienne came to Georgia, has been a good player for Georgia. And all you heard from the Florida Gator people when he decided to leave, a little bit of butt hurt, a little bit of, oh, but let's put some salve on it and make it feel better. They just ran him down, said he was no good, this, that, or the other. Well, we're going to find out on Saturday because Trevor's going to go back and play against his old teammates. We'll just see how good Mr. Etienne is. We'll see what kind of performances he puts on. But that's the thing. It's that sort of back and forth swapping of players, coaches, long-term rivals where you've beaten the other team when it hurts the most. That sort of stuff that makes this game what it is over its history. But it's not like you need anything special to make it that way. All you have to do is see the red and black of the Georgia Bulldogs lined up across from the green and blue of the Florida Gators, and you know it's a big game. It's a neutral site game. Yes, there are a lot of people that have big, serious opinions about whether or not it should be a neutral site game. It is all I have ever known it to be. My best memories and some of my worst have happened in this game at a neutral site. If this game were to ever go home and home, I get all of the cool things that would come along with that. I understand why Kirby Smart says he wishes it were home and home. For my money, I want it to be a neutral site game. I want it to remain a neutral site game. And that's the bottom line. Because it doesn't matter. The team that's losing often feels like the neutral field is a disadvantage for some reason. You lose a recruiting day, or you have to travel to the game, or whatever it is. Just my opinion, for my money, I wanted to stay a neutral site game, and you don't have to build it up anymore to make it a big game. It was even more important when the league split into divisions, because prior to that, the Gators honestly hadn't been very good inside the SEC. They were not a championship contender historically. But then they split into divisions, and now you had to get over that hurdle every year if you were going to win the SEC East and make it to Atlanta to play for the title. So, yeah, Georgia, Florida got bigger for a guy like me. Don't worry, we're building to it. But like I said, you do not have to have extra things to make this a big game. This is pretty simple for me. This sums it up. Like I say every year around this time, the Gators. That's how I feel. All the time. Loud and proud. Ron Burgundy understands. That's how I feel. And having been to enough Georgia-Florida games over my lifetime to know, I don't even feel bad about it. You don't often hear me use language like that. Well, virtually never on here. But I got to say, my experience going down to the game in Jacksonville, there are just as many Florida fans down there who feel exactly the same way that I do not hesitate to say, the Gators. That's how I feel. That's how they feel. Now, I am not somebody who likes to delve into a lot of deep trash talk or back and forth or any of that. It's just not what I enjoy. It doesn't add anything to the experience for me. I want to go and watch the game. I want to watch the teams play. But something about knowing that the Florida Gator fans feel that way about me makes me not feel bad about saying the Gators. That's just how I see it. It helps me sleep better at night. Not that I need an excuse to dislike Florida, but it is fun to say that. Let's do it again. The Gators. There you go. That's how I feel about it. It is good. This one gets my juices flowing. This one gets me amped up, riled up, fired up, whatever you want to say, more than any other game. And that's why I revel in this game every year. For years and years and years, I said there's really only one, there's like a series of things that have to happen, but there's really only one thing that makes or breaks my season as a Georgia Bulldogs fan. Did we have a successful year? Well, answer me one question. Did Georgia beat Florida? If Georgia beat Florida, then it's a successful year. Full stop for me. Now, I can always expand on that. I could expand on it and say, yeah, did Georgia beat Florida? Awesome. Did they win the East? Because in this period, we were in split, divisions. So if you beat Florida, pretty good chance you won the East. So did you beat Florida? Check. Did you win the East? Check. And then you go take your chance to win an SEC championship. That was how I gauged the season every year for the entirety of the time that the SEC was split into divisions. Now, we don't have divisions anymore, but we still get to play Florida. And there is no world ever that I can see where Georgia would not play Florida. So I have the rest of my days to look forward to each and every season, starting off by asking and telling the statement that would determine whether or not Georgia has a good year. And that is, did Georgia beat Florida? More often than not lately, that answer's been yes. So, the Gators. Now, I said that there are reasons that I hate Florida, above and beyond just, man, I don't like them and everything I've told you so far. So let's get into those right now. To begin, it's pretty simple. I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit. I'm going to start with jean shorts. Those of you watching here on YouTube, you can see the image. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the cutesy little jean shorts that ladies might choose to wear occasionally that are cut to fit them in a way that they feel flatters them. No. I'm talking about the jean shorts that are worn loudly and proudly by male Florida Gator fans, and female if you choose to go about it this way, where you take your worst pair of jeans and then you grab the rustiest set of scissors or knife that you can find, and then you just hack them off. All uneven, strings everywhere. It looks like your dog just got too hungry and ate your clothing for that week. And you wear those around and you're like, man, this is part of the game day outfit. That's what this is. That's how they wear it. Gators wear jean shorts. I used to think that was a joke, just a meme. And then I started going to the games. And I'll be damned if it's not true. Couldn't believe it. Could not believe it. When a meme comes to life, then you're like, yeah, that's embarrassing, man. That's embarrassing. Clean yourself up. Do it a little bit better. You're better than that. Or maybe you're not, because you're a Florida Gators fan. Now, this picture is going to serve me twice, because it's not only the jean shorts. You can level that up. It's the mullet. It's the mullet. Now, pair the mullet with those jean shorts. I've already told you about that orange. Awesome, awful orange. And it's smeared on everything. Looks like something you'd wipe off the bottom of your shoe. And it's all wrapped up in the full package of these chopped off, ill-fitting jean shorts. And then you put a hat on it with a mullet that looks like, I don't know, you were touched by an angel to get it to be that nice. And by nice, I'm not saying that to be flattering. I'm saying that to be, holy hell, look at the picture that you've put together for yourself. And you chose to go out in public that way. So the number 5 reason I dislike the Florida Gators so much is those jean shorts. Number 4, to put the cherry on top, it's that mullet. I understand that today, the kiddos, they might be like, yeah, I dig it. I want to wear the mullet. That's fine. There is a huge difference. A huge difference, because it's not the mullet by itself. It's the totality of the package. So Gators in jean shorts and mullets, man, it does not make for a pleasant fan experience from my perspective in my years of going to this game. Now, while we're on it, that's number 5. And number 4, while we're on it, let's just skip all that, because that's a portion of the fan base. Let's just go ahead and address everybody else. The Florida Gators fans. Now, again, this one is born out of my experience as a Generation Xer. And it's also part of the reason that I'm going to be real with you here. I'm going to give the University of Florida a little bit of credit. It's because of these fans being fired up the way they were when I was at the games as a student and a younger person. Those Gator fans were uber happy with their program. Could not be beaten. Cloud 9. Honestly, growing up, I never cared 2 thoughts about Alabama, because Alabama was not a good football team when I was coming up. After the early 90s, Alabama kind of got lost in the wilderness for 15 years or more, maybe 2 decades. Somebody had to fill that vacuum, and that was the Florida Gators. And those fans got so used to winning and so used to telling you about how they won and how they were going to win and how nothing was ever going to change. I just got tired of hearing it. And I've already told you, I'm not somebody who's just going to go back and forth with them. Talk your talk. You're winning. That's fine. But they had just a way about them. They had a way about them that made it seem extra grating. And I'm certain it was just simply because my team couldn't beat their team. So, in a way, I'm certain I was low-key jealous back in the day. I wish we could get at them one time. I wish we could get that win. But man, they're really good. How are they so good? All the time. And even when they weren't good, how did we lose to that team? That was the cycle. When I was coming up through high school and college, that was my reality as a Georgia Bulldogs fan. So kudos to you Florida Gators fans. You were cheering your team aggressively. And those of us that were on the other end of those games, well, we didn't take to it none too kindly. So yeah, reason number 3 that I hate the Florida Gators is because of my experiences with their fan base during their glory years, which we're going to drill down on just a little bit here in a minute. But it's not just the fans. It's the way they cheer. People get on Georgia for barking. I despise the Gator Chomp. I despise it even more that they will like get after each other and like give each other a hard time if you do it incorrectly, like there's a right way and a wrong way. Now, if you're a Gator fan, I'm sure you're like, well, you want to do it the right way. But I'm not a Gator fan. So when I see you guys arguing about how you do it, I'm like, how pretentious is that? And then they still just do it in your face all the time anyway when you win. It's almost like they're throwing punches at you, and they're not actually throwing punches, but it feels that way because they probably just beat your team. So again, it's not so much that the Gator fans did anything wrong here. It's just that for the better part of 2 decades, I was never on the positive end of that. And they let me know it vociferously with excitement. So good on them for being good fans. My hat's off to you for that, Florida. Your fans were rooting on your team. So have your fun. Have your fun. But just know that if you're going to give me that big old Gator chomp, when it don't go your way, I've got a little something for you. And I'm not talking about just a bark. No. You get to see the baby Gator. And you get to love it. So, let's figure out how we got here. Jean shorts. Hate them. Mullets with the jean shorts. Even worse. The Gator fans enjoying their team. That's the third reason. But in any rivalry, it can't just be all the superficial stuff. The games matter, and what happens on the field matters. And that's why this next one really does sting. Georgia fans, think back with me to the year 2002. You might be like, yeah, Georgia won the SEC for the first time in forever. And they did. It was a great year. Tons of great memories were made in that season. Remember when I was talking about Auburn earlier and where they fell in the rivalry? There was a big old play in that Auburn game that year that made a lot of difference. And Georgia went out there and won the SEC. But guess what else happened in 2002? It was a night game in Jacksonville, Florida. Rex Grossman's Gators went out there and threw more bubble screens to the sideline than I could count. Billy Bennett missed kick after kick, felt like. Couldn't find his way to the stadium. David Green, interceptions. DJ Shockley, interceptions. And everybody else across the country seemed to be losing that day. Georgia was sitting there at number 5. The Gators were down in the 20s. Number 20, number 22, well back. Hadn't had a great year. The Dogs were favored to win, and all Rex Grossman and that Bulldogs team, or that Florida Gators team, did that night was inexplicably find a way to beat my Georgia Bulldogs 20-13. You got to keep in mind that in 2002, winning and being in contention for the SEC championship and having an opportunity to consider you might be having a shot at a national championship, that was all really, really new to us Georgia people. And it was right there for the taking. The Dogs could have moved up to number 1 in the country with a win that night. They could have vanquished the hated Gators, set sail easily to Atlanta for a shot to win an SEC championship. But it was not to be. A heartbreaking loss. A Terrence Edwards drop that I'm certain you don't need to go to YouTube to remind yourself of what it looked like. That was the tale that night in Jacksonville. And it was not a lot of fun. So, as in any big rivalry, it has to be a heartbreaking loss. And for me, there is none that is more heartbreaking than the 2002 loss 20-13 to the Florida Gators. We were there. It was not a lot of fun. Now, Billy Napier is currently the head coach at the University of Florida. And I could have a lot of opinions about Billy. All I'll say is that before this season started, I wasn't sure he would even make it to this game as the head coach of the Florida Gators. Yet, here he is. He's hanging out with us. He's going to be in Jacksonville. I think now I'm in a position where not only do I believe that he's probably going to survive the season and not get fired if he loses to Georgia, but I think he's going to survive the season and come back next year because I think that the athletic program is in such disarray. His buyout is so large, and the timing of it all doesn't seem to work. I mean, I could be wrong. They might choose to let him go. But I think that at this point, Billy has gotten this team to show improvement to the level where I think he's going to be back next year. But this point isn't about Billy Napier. The reason Billy's on the screen is just to say that there have been head coaches of all flavors over the years. Ron Zook, even Will Muschamp, Georgia's own, was the head coach of the Gators. Will Muschamp and his Florida Gators were the last team to beat the Georgia Bulldogs back in 2020. So I think that's right. Maybe I'm getting them confused, but it's neither here nor there. The point is they have gone through coach after coach after coach. Dan Mullen, Urban Meyer, Ron Zook, Billy Napier, all those over the years. And some of those years, Georgia was the better team. Georgia was supposed to win. And somehow, a bad injury here, a crazy bounce of the ball there, Mother Nature and the weather, something happened every time it felt like to make the difference, and the Gators would win. Georgia just could not get over the hump. But that is not where most of my angst came from. It was some of it now. Like I said, there were occasions where you cannot figure out how my Georgia Bulldogs went into this game and did not come out victorious. But then there was a period of time when the coaching wheel was not spinning at the University of Florida. There was a fellow there who had played at the University of Florida, who then came back as a head coach and was uber successful. That guy, his name was Steve Spurrier. If you need to know why I hate the Florida Gators more than any other team that Georgia plays, it is because of one, Steve Spurrier. And I say that not to beat up on Steve Spurrier, although he sure loved beating up on the Georgia Bulldogs. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Steve Spurrier and what he was able to do at his alma mater because it was at his alma mater, but also just as a football coach, the way he revolutionized the game inside the SEC conference. You cannot help but respect a performance, a record, a history like he built at the University of Florida, and he was able to do it as a Florida man. I say good on him. It's the fact that he's a Florida man that made his time as a head coach what it was, in my opinion. In 1966, Steve Spurrier would win the Heisman Trophy. He would go into the game against the Georgia Bulldogs that season with an undefeated team. He was the quarterback. In that game against Georgia, he threw 3 interceptions. And his unbeaten Florida Gators lost to the Dawgs that day in 1966, 27-10. In fact, Georgia scored a thumb-in-your-eye touchdown with just 3 seconds left in the game. Do you think a competitor like Steve Spurrier was not going to be bitter over that? That is the kind of thing that flavors the experience of Georgia, Florida. That is the reason that I hate the Florida Gators, because of the pettiness of a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback who wanted to exact revenge year over year over year against the team that crushed his dream season as a player. I'm not even going to lie. On some level, I completely get it. In fact, I admire it because it speaks to the kind of competitor that Spurrier was as a player, and then the fire he had as a head coach later when he came back as the head coach of the Florida Gators. That day in 1966 scarred Steve. I think it's safe to say that. And he loved playing and beating the Georgia Bulldogs. Steve Spurrier in 1995 is the only opponent, the only head coach to lead an opponent into Athens and put 50-plus points on the board. Kirby Smart was on that team. The twists and turns of that probably lies in another video somewhere down the road. Maybe I'll get to it. But it's those sorts of kernels, those sorts of pops out of the fire that jump out onto the rug, right? And burn a spot in the rug and then potentially set the entire house on fire. It's those things that get etched into your soul as a competitor that stick with you forever and drive you. I think it's as simple as point A to point B. That's the reason Steve Spurrier hates the University of Georgia. He doesn't hate the University of Georgia. He doesn't hate me as a graduate of the University of Georgia. He hates them because he wants to beat them in a way that he doesn't want to beat another team. I'll go to my deathbed believing that. And again, I kind of admire it. Action. The obstacle is the way. Georgia put the screws to him, and he made it his life's mission to put the screws to Georgia. At the University of Florida, Steve Spurrier went 11-1 against the Georgia Bulldogs and continued to be a thorn in their side when he came back into the league and coached at South Carolina years later. Every opportunity he had to beat the Georgia Bulldogs, he relished it and took advantage of it more times than not. Story time, that one loss that he suffered, well, that just happened to be my first game at the Georgia-Florida game. 1997, Jim Donnan took his team into Jacksonville as a 3-touchdown underdog. Champ Bailey was on that team. The Lucky triplets were on that team. Kirby Smart, Hines Ward, Mike Bobo were on that team. Robert Edwards, Corey Allen. Yes, that one is etched in my memory. Potentially the greatest Georgia Bulldogs memory I have. Now, we've won a couple of national championships since then, so maybe I need to do that video too. What are my top 3 or top 5 Georgia Bulldog fan memories? I don't know if you guys are interested in that. Leave me a comment. Let me know. So 11-1 Spurrier was against my Georgia Bulldogs during his time at the University of Florida. So, number 1 on my reason as a Generation X Georgia Bulldog fan to hate the Florida Gators, Steve Spurrier. And don't mistake it. Again, I don't hate the man. I appreciate the man. I appreciate him as a coach. But I hate what he did to my dogs all those years. But at least in my mind, he had good motivation to do it, and I can give him credit for that. But I don't even feel bad, again, using the word hate, because the Gators feel that way about Georgia. Kirby Smart, on the low key, in my humble opinion, feels that way about the Florida Gators. And given that we are now here in the 2024 season and things are getting serious as we head down the stretch here, try to figure out who's going to play for the SEC championship and make it into the 12-team playoff with a chance to win a national championship. Now that it really, really matters, maybe old Kirby, Dark Kirby, is going to start to make an appearance week after week after week. And if you're a Georgia Bulldogs fan looking at this Florida Gators game and you are wanting your Georgia Bulldogs to beat that Florida Gators team as badly as they possibly can, then yeah, I'm going to welcome Dark Kirby to come on in here and show up. Make a statement coming off a bye week against a team that, in my opinion, you cannot beat badly enough. I'm here for it. I am ready. Bring them on and the Gators. So, like I said, this was not going to be your typical breakdown of the game. It's not going to be this, we match up this way with a freshman quarterback and we're getting this guy back from injury. No. You're going to show up. You're going to try to knock somebody's nose in the dirt for 4 quarters just for the fun of it. Yes, Georgia's in contention for bigger things. Yes, there are hopes of a national championship, potentially a conference championship, depending on how things play out. But for me, and I'm willing to bet for most of my Generation X brothers and sisters across Dog Nation, this game will be a little bit sweeter when the clocks hit 0 and my Georgia Bulldogs run down to the student section and jump into the stands and celebrate with the rest of Dog Nation. Because there is no victory that is sweeter, in my opinion, than one over the hated Florida Gators. The Georgia Bulldogs are heading down to Jacksonville for the annual border war with those hated Gators. There is no game that I, as a Georgia Bulldogs alum, want to win more than this one. There are reasons. I have laid them out in the podcast for you. I hope now you have a better understanding of why me and my Generation X brothers and sisters feel the way we feel when it comes to the Florida Gators. We can't beat them bad enough. We can't beat them often enough. And we will never get tired of beating those Florida Gators. It's really simple. I can boil it all down to 3 words. 3 words that I've embraced over the course of this podcast time and time again. It all comes down to one sentiment on both sides, but absolutely from this Georgia Bulldogs fan, and that is simply the Gators. Until next time, y'all take care of yourselves, take care of your friends, take care of your families, take care of each other. And go Dogs!
Told them, how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told them.